everybody's really talking about, in varying degrees, the same thing, which is that you experience life intensely, or you experience your own place in it intensely, whether it's a response of anger or emotional sadness, or just becoming avid about whatever it is that you think is happening, and then after the wave crests and you look back on it, the clarity that you thought you were expressing, you realize that something had moved you that you thought was a wave you wanted to follow, but in retrospect, you're not really quite so sure whether it was what you should have done or not. I was teasing Sai Ganesh when he was saying, how can I stop doing this? What I really meant to say is by becoming somebody else. That the first thing that we have to realize, and this is actually one of the most difficult things to realize, I think, in terms of personal growth, whether it's spiritual or on any level, is there's no shortcut. That whatever the reality is that we're working with, we simply must deal with it. And a lot of wrong thinking is the idea that we want things to be different, but we don't really want to change. And so we're always trying to find a way to make things different. We're much more interested in making things different than we actually are in asking, what is my actual next step toward that difference? I just want it to be different. And it's natural to, and it's positive to want it to be different. Sai Ganesh mentioned, maybe this has always been true, maybe he's just more aware of it now, that certain things that happen in retrospect are not what he would have liked to have had happen. In all probability, he was always doing them, just didn't notice. So when you suddenly begin to notice, there's often a great deal of pain that begins at that point. But the pain is only caused because now you are aware of what was always going on. And we have this feeling that something has changed, but really nothing has changed. It's just that our level of awareness has heightened. And heightening levels of awareness are actually the entire definition of spiritual progress, of progress of any kind. If you watch children grow, what you're watching is that they just become more aware. They become aware of language, they become aware of reading, they become aware of the laws of mathematics. And in our own personal lives, we often go along completely unconsciously, just have no idea, and then things keep happening to us. Friends get angry at us, spouses leave us, children become alienated from us, bosses fire us. We don't really have any idea why, because we're not aware enough of the energy we're putting out to be able to consciously decide even whether it's what we want to put out. We don't even have a choice point because we don't even know it's happening. So even though it's often distressing to become more aware, the only way to freedom is to become aware simply of what is, because it controls us anyway. If we have unresolved traumas, if we have unresolved angers, if we're just in a state of rebellion against divine law, whatever it might be, those things dictate our responses to life, and our lack of awareness does not make them any less present or any less influential. But it's a strange thing as we become aware, because often we suddenly feel worse. When I teach the beginning meditation class, have taught it, when we would teach the 4-week class, at the end of the class I would talk to people about, because they would be very enthusiastic and resolved to keep on meditating, and I would know that many of them would not keep doing it after the class series was over. So I would often devote the last class to why people stop meditating. And there are a number of reasons. You stop getting fresh inspiration. You isolate yourself too much. Just various things. But one of them is that it begins to work, which is an odd reason why you would think you wouldn't do it. But one of the things that happens when you begin to meditate is your awareness increases. And you may be aware of the beauty of God's presence in your life and the power of just many, many beautiful things. But you also may become more aware of yourself. And you may become more aware of, how you're actually responding. Or even just what your everyday consciousness is. Even if you may have just been too inattentive even to notice, that nothing was happening. But you begin to become aware of, you have a point of contrast perhaps. Your meditation gives you a point of contrast. And you realize how peaceful you are when you're meditating, how agitated you are when you aren't, or how agitated you are when you're meditating, whatever it might be. And one way to deal with expanded awareness is to reduce it. Just run away from it. Just run away from the knowledge, because then you can make yourself feel better by dulling your overall perceptions of things. And this is what fundamentally almost all addiction is about, of marijuana or alcohol or various other things, tranquilizers, sleeping pills, whatever it might be, is it just reduces your awareness a bit. And if too much awareness is too painful, then you reduce it a little bit. It's different if you're dealing with physical pain. But when you're dealing with psychological pain, one of the ways you do it is you just become less conscious of it. Swami once quoted a woman whose husband died. Someone said, "How is she doing?" "Oh, she's doing fine. She's taking so many tranquilizers, she hardly remembers." And that's not a solution. But that's what we're working with. So all that I'm saying on the positive side is, one of the ways over many incarnations that we cope with the many difficult things that happen to us, you may be able to remember difficulties you've experienced in this life, but we've lived many incarnations, and by no means does all the business of one incarnation get resolved in that incarnation. I mean, think about just the little bit that you know about this incarnation. People who commit suicide, people who just stagger off and their lives don't work at all, and then they just die sort of miserable and alone. Somebody whose life is cut off by an accident. People who become angry and estranged and just never resolve it. I mean, that doesn't go away. That remains as an impression in your chakras, and your chakras then are the determining factor in the vibration that you have now. And so we are a very, very complicated accumulation of experiences and responses. So one thing that we have to understand very simply is, this isn't simple. And I really encourage you, and I encourage everyone I talk to, don't be dismissive of your own experiences. It's very tempting, once you get the idea that this would be a better way to feel, to start just denigrating the way you actually feel. Now, don't misunderstand me. A lot of the way we feel is lousy. Lousy in the sense that it doesn't serve us, it doesn't make us happy, it doesn't make anyone else happy. And for that reason, it's not a good idea. But we can't just dismiss it as being stupid, or that's the word people usually use. I know it's stupid to feel this way. Well, it isn't really stupid to feel this way, because you've spent many incarnations working your way up to this. You've put in more years than you can remember building this persona. And you're not a stupid person, and you're not an insincere person. It may have been wrong thinking, but it seemed like the good idea at the time. And now that I find myself, feeling like this, it won't help you even slightly to dismiss it. One, because it has way more power to influence you than you have to dismiss it. So it's sort of like when you're being attacked by a rabid dog, to say, nice puppy, nice puppy. He's not going to care if you call him a nice puppy. He's just going to chew you up. And so you can say to all these accumulated feelings and misunderstandings, oh, you're just stupid, go away. But they're not about to go away. They're just going to chew you up. So it's not that you, like some people try to say, oh, everything I feel must be good. No, much of it is really lousy. But it's not stupid. It's very, very clever, actually. It's insinuated itself into you very deviously. So you can't underestimate it. Part of it is you don't want to underestimate the power of your own delusions. So you have to have a lot of respect for them and realize that it took me a long time to get here, and therefore it's going to take a certain amount of energy to get me out. But I got myself here by a whole series of reactions and responses to life, and there's nothing fixed about it. All I'm talking about is a habit that has been built up by, I've continuously added to this habit, and so now if I want to have another habit, I need to begin to dismantle the old one and simultaneously construct a new one. And just even having that thought in your mind just eases it all. Is this working for me? Well, if this isn't working for me, I will now begin the process of creating a new reality. And how long will it take you to create a new reality? Depends how much power there is in the old one, how much power you can take from the old one to put into the new one. But whatever it is, in a certain sense, it doesn't make any difference. Because once you are aware of where you're wanting to go, Swami Kriyananda put it really beautifully once. He said, if you judge yourself at all, and then he put in, and I don't recommend judging yourself, he said you should only judge yourself according to what you aspire to become. He said, because by definition, everything is always in motion. Nothing remains fixed. And so by the time you're able to actually cognize and name something, that means you're sailing past it. Because there it is, and I've named it, and the very fact that I've named it means that things have now shifted and I'm going in a different direction. So he said, you always keep your attention what your ambition is, because that's really much more who you are, because that's where your energy is going now. The habit of the mind is strong because you yourself have reinforced that habit many, 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 many times. And if you think of it as being 100 million ergs of energy, or whatever you would call it, okay, you're not going to be able to change that momentum with 50 ergs of energy. Eventually, the two forces have to equalize each other, and then the new direction has to overcome the other. Think of it exactly as if I was going across the water to visit someone on the other side of the East Bay, and I missed my exit. I was just, thinking about this, thinking about that, and I missed my exit. And then I absolutely knew that I'd missed my exit and I needed to get off. But then I ran into a traffic jam, then I ran into a detour, then I ran into an accident. And it was like an hour and a half before I was able to get back right to where I was, by which point I was too late for my appointment. I mean, everything happened. But it was just because there were all these forces that just were continuing to push me. My resolution was clear and simple, but my capacity to fight against all that energy took a very, very, very long time. I persevered and eventually got back to where I wanted to be, by which point the whole new reality had started because I'd missed my appointment and so on. But that's exactly what you're working with. Some part of you has decided that you'd like to be somebody else, but you have an enormous amount of momentum. You've had your foot on the accelerator and you're going 100 miles down that freeway. And whoa, there's my exit. But how are you going to get back to that exit is itself going to be a big journey. But the point is that you know where it is, and you're doing your best now to turn the vehicle. And you may get distracted again and find yourself going farther down that road than you meant. But as soon as you realize that that's not where you want to be, you just turn it. Now, most people give up. They just give up, and they just decide that the present misery is just fine because the fix is not quick. And that's why it takes us a very long time to become spiritually realized, and why we don't make that much progress in one lifetime. Because it's an arduous effort, and it requires courage and determination. Now, as I said, I can give you more to work with than that, but it's very, very important. Because there's a dear friend of mine who has been asking questions in classes for 30 years. Every question is the same question. Isn't there an easier way? You know, he has very many clever ways of putting it. And his questions are actually quite interesting. We have, you know, fascinating discussions. But the end of almost every one of them is, isn't there an easier way? There must be a shortcut. Are you holding back on me? Is there a shortcut? Not that I've seen. But we spend a huge amount of our energy rebelling against the fact that there's no easier way. And we're having a little tantrum because we're having a little tantrum. It's interesting, you see, because in the Festival of Light, which all of you have heard on Sunday, and we go through this little thing with the bird, and I don't know how much you all listen or whether you're, you know, just tuning out. And because I'm reading it, I have to pay attention to it every time, which I consider to be a great blessing. But I pay really close attention to it every time. There's this little bird. The bird is, you know, made by God, and he's supposed to go out and have this really happy time. But he starts having experiences, and when he starts having his own experiences, he starts thinking, what do they know? You know, this feels really good to me. Just having a little tantrum, getting my way, indulging myself, you know, just getting it all for me, making myself important. This feels pretty good. What do they know? And so the bird goes into this stage, which is called the revolt. And what we're revolting against is just sort of this simple instruction that we were given. You are a part of the infinite. Just stay a part of the infinite. Hey, but it feels really good just being myself. And then it says, and the bird, you know, even though repeatedly the bird lost all he had. So even though repeatedly it doesn't work for us, it doesn't occur to us that there's a fundamental problem here. We just think that I need to run this same system slightly differently. Right? And that's what we keep doing. We run the same system slightly differently. People marry repeatedly the same person. They cause the same troubles again and again in their lives because even though we've suffered from it repeatedly, we had to lose everything we had. Now, Master himself argued with Divine Mother. He said, why do you have to cause your children so much suffering? But the fact of the matter is, and I will speak from my own experience, I don't think we learn unless we're hit really hard. If we're comfortable and we're pleased, we have a tendency to stay right where we are. And we think that's fine, just like a little child. Why do I have to go to school, Mommy? Because someday you're going to have to get a job and you're going to have to understand, no, Mommy, I'm just going to live with you for the rest of my life. And the little child declares that. But the mother knows that the child's not going to live with me for the rest of my life, and even not even going to want to. So you have to just pick the kid up and send him to kindergarten, even if he really doesn't want to go. And so Divine Mother, we say, oh, everything's just fine. I'll just have it my way. And Divine Mother says, no, I don't think so. And so what she does is she keeps giving us feedback. And repeatedly, we lose everything we have, and it takes us a very long time before it even crosses our mind that the problem is what I'm doing. And that's when, according to this little thing, we get to the place called the quest. And the quest is when we stop rebelling against things as they are, and we become interested, as they appear to be, and we become interested in finding out what is actually true. Who am I really? Where does my happiness really come from? Why am I crying all the time? You know, why am I trying to run away? Why don't people like me? Why did my husband or my wife leave me? Why don't my children come home often enough? We actually just become interested, and that's the quest. That's the quest for actual knowledge. Prior to that, we just continue to rebel. And most of us teeter right on that edge. And even the thought of, but I want it to be different, it's not different, is just rebellion. Because I want it to be different, but it's not different. Okay, what does that mean? We spend a huge amount of energy just throwing dust up in the air. Swami tried to explain to me for years, feeling guilty about your mistakes is not the same as changing. But I'm putting out so much energy, and I'm just so dramatic, and I'm feeling so terrible. And he said, you just spend all your energy just feeling terrible, and you put no energy into actually being different. I mean, he said that to me for a long time, decades, before I actually finally noticed. My response to an error It was just to plunge into a mood, and then gradually the mood would wear off, but no energy had actually been gone into a plan of action, a resolution, a strengthening of my determination. It was all spent just in misery, and therefore had no effect. I was always just in rebellion. If I'm not good, I'll be miserable. If I'm not good, I'll be miserable. If I'm not good, I'll be miserable. Oh, maybe I should try to understand how to be good. Maybe that would work. Good meaning those things that will bring me happiness. But the biggest emotion you have to get over is reacting to your own limitations. Swamiji put it in a really interesting way once when this woman had done something really careless. The exact details, I remember all the circumstances, but I don't remember what the it was. But somehow or another she did something that caused a great deal of difficulty for Swamiji, and he had to sort something out. Maybe she spoke inappropriately to someone and he had to rectify the situation. I don't really remember, but it caused a lot of difficulty and had been quite careless on her part. About 4 days later, Swamiji perceived that she was very, very moody. He said, "What are you so moody about? Oh," she said, "I just feel so badly about, what happened the other day, and I caused you so much trouble." And, in her own mind, it was like she was showing her greatness of spirit by still being so concerned about this error. Swami's response was, "What egoism," he said. Not egotism, but egoism. And she just looked so startled because it was the last thing she expected to hear, because she was completely, just completely down on herself. He said, "You're so shocked that you are capable of making a mistake that 4 days later it's all you can think about." You see that? How egoic, to just think that I'm so perfect that every time I make an error, it's like a big national emergency that the whole world has to just spend a whole lot of time contemplating. Whereas, in fact, wow, there's no surprise at all that we're flawed in so many ways. And that's what we fundamentally have to get over. That's real humility. Humility, Master defined as self-honesty. It's a very interesting concept. And therefore, if you're very good at something, to be humble is to say, "Yeah, I do that really well. This is a delicious soup I just made. Yes, I'm very pleased with the way my daughter has, taken care of her life. I'm happy to have, contributed to her becoming such an upstanding person." If you did in fact contribute, it's not a lack of humility to just say it. But it is a lack of humility to say, "I'm so terrible, I do everything wrong, nothing ever goes right for me," because it's just way exaggerated. It's not honest. Or as he was saying to her, it's not humility to say, "I made a mistake and now the whole world has to stop and just worship my error." Of course you made a mistake. Who do you think you are? Of course you go out of control. Who do you think you are? I'm just a little devotee here struggling along. And we have to stop rebelling against that. We have to go from the revolt to the quest. The quest is not freedom. The quest just says, wow, what is going on here? Look at that. I'm such a good-hearted person and I mean so well, and look what a mess I made of that. I'm not saying that's easy, but that's the only way out. And you also see what courage that takes, because all of a sudden you have to ask, what is going on here? It's really not their fault anymore. They didn't really make you do it, you just did it. And they may also have been really awful. A lot of times they are awful. And that sort of makes it all more subtle, because they are awful. But that still, as I said to someone recently, someone else's shortcomings is not a justification for your own. It may have been the catalyst for your own, but it's not a justification. You're just as responsible for your reaction, even if they also really did it badly. Does that all make sense? Can you see what an important key there is in that? Any comments or thoughts or questions on that?
Can you repeat what you just said?
I just said freedom is when you are so conscious of divine law and the consequences of breaking it that you are no longer tempted to break it. That's what, now I know it can be done because I know Swami Kriyananda. And he just didn't. He just didn't step outside of attunement with a higher vibration. Because, and he didn't do it out of any great sense of discipline. It was like, why would he? Why would you just pick up a knife and stab yourself in the heart? What would be the point of doing that? But for us, it doesn't look like that. It looks like, I'll just grab what I want for myself. I'll just indulge my emotion. I'll just be angry. I'll just, whatever it is. And we haven't learned. We're still in the quest. And over the course of many lifetimes, we finally just understand that whatever I think I'm getting, I'm not really getting. I mean, think of anything that you don't really want to do anymore. I like sweetness. I like sweet taste. I'm a fan of sweet things, but they don't make my body really, really happy. So even though I like them, I don't eat very much of it, just because I know what's going to happen. So it takes a little bit of discipline, not to, but not much, because it's so clear in my mind what's going to happen if I do, that just the pleasure here, there's not much pleasure here because I know what's going to happen next. And so we can all look at many things in our lives that we no longer have any inclination to do because we know what's going to happen next. And then we look at the things where we don't seem to know what's going to happen next, where the impulse to do it is so strong that we forget what's going to happen next. But if you can learn one thing, you can learn them all. And that's what the quest is about. It's mental, emotional desires that are much more powerful than just desire for sweets for most people. I mean, people put too much emphasis on physical purification and too little on mental and emotional purification. That's why I hesitate. Sometimes it's a nice discipline, but as Swamiji said, God comes when you have a pure heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, Jesus said, for they shall see God. He didn't say, blessed are the pure with pure tummies. A man is not defined by what he puts into his mouth, but by what comes out of it. That was also from the Bible. So yes, there's a value. I find a value in a certain, purity of diet, or I like an energized diet because it brings my consciousness down otherwise. But it's a small thing, relatively speaking. If you have a pure heart and a pure consciousness, that's what matters. Something that used to bother you, now you find you're just responding to it instead of reacting to it. The tricycles are in the path, I will walk around them, or I will put them away, rather than I will rail at the people who left them there. Yeah. It's just, they're the tricycles, and the tricycles honestly don't care what you think. They just sit there. Mm-hmm. And you get to have all these different experiences. Somebody treats you very unkindly. Maybe they really are terrible, right? But in the end, how you respond to them is what you experience. And if you can say, well, they're unkind to me because they've had a miserable upbringing and they don't know any better. Or, as ye sow, so shall you reap, and I don't have to worry about them because they'll straighten it out themselves. If they're going to be consistently unkind, then sooner or later the karma will catch up with them. Hey, maybe that's my karma catching up with me right now. Now there's a novel thought, isn't it? This is the quest. Would this be happening to me if it wasn't appropriate and then given me exactly something that I don't understand? So is the person mistreating me actually hurting me or helping me? There's so many different ways that you can look at it, which all becomes part of, let's use the word, do I rebel or do I go on the quest? And when you go on the quest, it doesn't change how people are behaving. It doesn't make them right if they're wrong. It just gives you a way to relate that will move you forward instead of keeping you trapped. I remember someone was severely hurt by someone who was close to her, and she was really struggling to get over all the different things that came up because of that. And she came to Swami and she sort of said, well, everything that happened was just perfect. Everybody just did exactly what they were supposed to do. Swami said, no, he said, that person behaved very badly. And then he said, very seriously, don't comfort yourself by telling yourself a lie. There's no comfort in untruth. The only freedom is to actually look at it exactly as it is. I trusted this person and they betrayed my trust. Okay, they betrayed my trust. Now what? Do I spend all of my life concerned with their actions? Or do I say to myself, well, number one, karma's always fair, and what comes back to is because, generally speaking, it's something, at least in some way, you have some relationship to what comes to you. So there it is. So now, what can I learn? What can I do? How can I overcome? Does that make sense? There's a certain pleasure in our suffering. I came to a certain point where I had to realize, this was a few years ago, and it was almost like karmic memories. There was a few specifics. I had this one long relationship that was so difficult to work out. I could never get along with these people, even though I wanted to, and I tried. And I finally realized that, I did not want harmony. I wanted them to apologize. I wanted them to acknowledge that I was right and they were wrong, and that I had been right in many incarnations and they had been wrong in many incarnations, and I wanted them to apologize. I just had to admit it. I really wasn't trying to make peace. I wasn't ready for peace. I wanted an apology. And then I had to really, that's the quest. It's like, oh, wow. And there was nothing I could do about it. It was really sincerely how I felt. Any wish on my part to say that I want to get over this was completely insincere. I wanted it to resolve by being right, being justified, and finally being recognized and being told that I'm so sorry. You really have suffered, you poor little sap, But no one was going to do that. There was not a chance in the world that was ever going to happen. So then I had to think, And none of it was simple. And even to this day, I'm mostly done, but not quite. Still, pieces of me just still think, oh, they owe me an apology. Even if they do, who cares? That's become my new mantra. Nobody cares, Asha. You're just all by yourself here trying to make the world do what you want to do. You feel helpless. You want things to be different and they aren't. And you think that somebody's going to come and make it right for you. But nobody knows but Jesus. And I say to myself, nobody cares but Jesus. But Jesus cares, deeply cares. And so that's where you go. And now merely to be able to say that, I came to that realization in that situation, it must have been at least 15 years ago. And I really can't say that I'm done. I'm a lot better than I was, and it's helped me a great deal. But just, I've spent so many incarnations believing that someone actually injured me that it's not so easy to give it up. But it's also, I can't go quite so far into it anymore because I'm learning divine law. Well, forgiveness is a very interesting word. Forgiveness is a very powerful word that people use all the time, and I respect the word. I like the word myself. I like the word acceptance better, because forgiveness still has that little touch of you were wrong and I'm right, but now I'm going to be such a big person that I'm just going to forgive you. And so there's still a little bit of, I'm the right one, you're the wrong one, but since you don't have it in you to apologize to me, then I'll just let it go. However, acceptance just says, this is what God sent me. This is what happened to me. You did your best, or maybe you just were really evil to me, but everybody did what they were going to do, and this is what we're working with. And who could ever apologize to me enough that would even make any difference? It's just like, and that's not small, that's very big. What I saw in Swami Kriyananda was acceptance is actually exactly the right word. He just accepted reality as it was. He wasn't always in rebellion against it. He said to me once, it's very tempting, he said, to think, if this one just had a few of the qualities of that one, then if that one just had a few of the qualities of this one, he said, don't go there. It's just not worth it, because everybody just is what they are. If only I had done something different. Well, we need to just accept reality as it is and then build from there. Nobody's going to apologize to me. Nobody cares how angry I am. My anger is going to do nothing except poison my life. No, there's no shortcuts. It just is what it is. So now let's get going. It's like if one of your legs is cut off, and you're now suddenly crippled in that way. You can't just get up every morning and say, I wonder if it's going to be there this morning. and just, stand up on one leg and try to walk and fall over. But that's sort of what we do with our emotions. I wonder if I just pretend it's different, that it'll be different. That's why, but forgiveness is what happens, because once you accept, what is there to rebel against? A person just is what they are. People do what they do. But I know that the power of forgiveness has a lot of power for people, and I don't want to take that power away, because it's a way of getting into yourself and understanding what you want to do. I am a person who is given to great ups and downs. Just quoting, I go up, I go down, I go up, I go down. I'm triggered very easily. This is who I am. Okay, so what's my strategy, given that I'm so explosive and unreliable? When I began to appreciate how easily I was triggered, and I still am, but I'm better. I began to recognize, and this is what you said, Chandra, when I am in that space, nothing that I'm doing is reliable. And so that was just my first principle, which is I tried to save enough of my self-awareness that said, when you are in that space, you're not as smart as you think you are. And then I had to try to think of objective ways to be able to tell when I was in that space. Because, of course, when you're there, it's happening really fast and you feel really smart. You feel like you finally have the picture. And because, one of the reasons? Because you've cut out all external contradiction. Because you become so intent on your perception that there's no room for anything to contradict you. And people get very misled by that. There was a man who came to Swamiji once, and he proposed a course of action for himself, which he followed, which was disastrous. And he said, but it feels so right to me. And Swamiji he sort of would have me in the background sometimes when he was talking to people. So I got to learn a lot by just not participating, but watching. And then asking him later. I said, Swamiji, I think the reason it feels so right to him is because he has shut out all input. And he's just alone with his own egoic preferences. And naturally, that's a very harmonious place to be, because there's no one there but his own desires. And so everything just flows. But see, that's what happens when we get a little intent. We cut out all input. Nobody can talk to us. Nobody can contradict us. And we're not hearing anything but our own voice. And so it feels, there's a lot of power there. Whether we're excited or not, I remember, this was, when I was a child, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle with my father and some of his colleagues. Actually, the wife of one of his colleagues. And she had this huge explosive thing, and things got very complicated. This is all just as a child, so I just witnessed it from the edge. But I remember saying to my father the next day, well, is it better? He said, it's kind of like a hard-boiled egg. After a while, it stops steaming, but it's still hard-boiled. And I always remembered that, the conviction, and the person wasn't, yelling anymore, but the conviction that they had perceived things as they actually were was untouched. That's how you get really misled. But what I'm trying to say is, I began to be able to see the objective characteristics that I could watch of my distorted state of mind. So for me, I would talk faster. I would the pitch of my voice would get higher. I would interrupt anyone who tried to speak during the time I was trying to speak. These were just objective. It didn't matter what the subject was. Now somebody else maybe, I burst into tears. I become very angry. I have a desire to throw myself off the balcony. Everybody has a different way of responding. But I was able, or it can be the opposite. It can be when I get like that, I shrink into myself. Maybe your posture. Maybe your posture goes like this. Maybe you tend to grip your fingers. There's many things, if you start paying attention, you'll see that you have a method. And so what I began to realize is whenever I saw those things manifesting, I would stop what I was doing. Just stop. I would stop in the middle of a word. I would just stop what I was doing because I would know that I'm not where I want to be. And I couldn't tell by my reasoning that I was wrong, but I could tell by the objective manifestations of it. And that was the beginning, because then at least I was able to breathe in that moment. Just my brother and I, who are both exceedingly verbal and had a lot of volatility between us at different times, we made an agreement that if either of us felt the energy going off, we would say the word skid. We're skidding out of control here. This is as an adult. This was an adult solution, not a child solution. And as soon as either of us said the word skid, we would both cease talking. And we would separate for a little period of time, until we could come back. It was just like, it was a game, but it really worked. And, not one word could ever be spoken after the word skid. It couldn't be but. No, it was just like, we're out, we're off. Nothing that's going to happen from here is going to be helpful. And, so we pulled back until we get at least some. It doesn't mean that you suppress the issue, that you never discuss it, you never come back. You just try to come back to some point where you're not going to deeply regret it later. Even with what Sai Ganesh was saying about why didn't I say the right thing later, I suspect if you pay attention, you'll see that there's a syndrome that you're playing out each time. And if you can you can feel it in your somewhere, or you can tell by how fast you're answering or whatever it might be. Okay, is that helpful? Culture is relevant, upbringing is relevant, because when Swami wrote his autobiography, you're from India, I'm of course American, I know Anna Kaiser's from Finland, Sai Ganesh is from India, so it's sort of, we have several cultures just right in the room here. When Swami wrote his autobiography, he described his parents and their families and sort of his grandparents and just the whole thing, and he put a very interesting line in there. He said, I came into this world fully myself. And on one hand, you could read that as he was making an oblique reference to his own consciousness, which I think he was. But he was also saying everyone comes into this world fully themselves. You're not created. Your soul has its destiny, and it chooses a body to express that destiny. The body doesn't create the destiny creates the body. He said, but I am sharing with you the influences with which I chose to associate myself. And that's how I often think about it. I chose to associate myself with these certain influences because they are now part of the destiny. They will help me even to understand what my destiny actually is. Because these are the influences I chose to associate with because they have something to do with me. Not that everything defines me, and not that it's obvious, but this was a necessary part of who I'm trying to be. I'm American, but I was born into a Jewish family. And I've always, I tell people that I'm Jewish. I've always mentioned it. It's always been part of it, but I wasn't raised religious. And it's always been just a little bit of a puzzle to me. And I just very relatively recently, I really thought about the influences that I chose to associate with. Very intellectual, very verbal, somewhat combative in its way of relating to the world, as Jewish people can be, because we're the minority, but we're very superior to everyone. These are the influences, and being an American Jew was perfect, just perfect for me. Not because it's about Judaism, but because those influences brought a whole lot of karmas up to the front for me. And so now, sort of looking at it objectively, I can say, oh yeah, these were really serious karmic issues that I've had to sort out. And in almost all cases, it took my faults and made them much worse. And when I kept thinking, why didn't I incarnate where my faults would be balanced? And I realized because I didn't know they were faults. They had to be, I didn't understand divine law. I didn't understand how that way of being, which had worked for me for a long time, had now stopped working for me, and I had to be different. So I was pushed. So it's one way to think about it. And when I was in India, have been in India trying to work with people like this, and just encountering this, especially among the women, this completely different upbringing. I was really quite bewildered. And that was why I was, talking to various friends of mine, just trying to get a grip on it. But then I realized, oh, well, you were born into this culture that doesn't give you a chance to develop your individuality because you need to develop your individuality. And so you were pushed into a place where it got worse. And so now you know it's a problem and you're going to have to move with it instead of just surrendering to it and taking it. I don't mean everyone, but the women who would come to me with this need to find themselves at the age of 40, and it being the first time they'd ever asked the question. And I just really couldn't tell for a while what the right answer was, because it was so like not my experience. But then I realized, oh yeah, I've been here already. I've been through this. That's why I wasn't born Indian, because I didn't need it. I fought that battle and won it. So now let's sort of figure out how to go. You see? And this is all why you can't just write it off or dismiss it, and there's no shortcut. I'm looking at the two of you and thinking how completely different your cultures are, and mine. We'll make a triangle here, the three of us, but each of us got a situation, and this is where I wanted to go now, that pushes us off balance, and now we have to figure out how to get back to center. And that's where I want to start now, is just talking about what emotions are and what being centered is and what being off center is. Okay? Do you have questions or thoughts about any of that before we go on? My friend Shivani, who also grew up in a Jewish family, she was much more dedicated to it than I was. But she was really raised more in a Jewish bubble in Philadelphia, I think, or somewhere like that. And it popped when she was sitting in the first day of her freshman year of college. And she was sitting around with the whole group of girls, wherever she was in college. And she was the only Jewish woman in the group. And it crossed her mind that this was a very good school, and you had to be very smart to get into it. And all of these women had gotten into it, and not one of them was Jewish. And it was the first time it crossed her mind that maybe the whole picture was a little distorted. But you see she was a very smart 18-year-old at that point. But you just take it in. So that's why you have to be nice to yourself. And this is just this tiny little fragment of one incarnation. Okay, this is like a very fascinating mystery game. Where did these attitudes come from? And how many of them do I still want? And when you begin to think of it more impersonally as just a scavenger hunt, of course it takes a lot of detachment, use the word detachment, which was a lot of detachment, to be able to just see yourself as a player in a bigger game and realize that, all that I call myself is just a tiny aspect of myself. It's just this little piece of personality playing itself out. It's not my whole definition of self. But it is. It's like speaking of childhood, because I'm thinking about, we used to play Monopoly a lot. You had those little whatever things you had that you moved around. And so we are one of those. We have these little things that we're moving around. But there's a whole huge force that's actually moving that around. But that's what we look like right now. We're the little token that we're moving around. And that token has characteristics that are helpful. But the real you is the force that's moving that. You have to act through it, so you have to work it out. It's one of the ways to help. So, all right, I was going to make a picture on the board because I think it's helpful. Because one of the things that we need to make a distinction, and this is just vocabulary, English language is imprecise, and so we have to make decisions. This whole class has been about emotions, and we've just used that word actually without even defining it. We sort of know what we're talking about. And then an alternative word is feelings. Now, the thing that we have to work with, a lot of people deal with their emotions by deadening their feelings, right? Because my feelings get away from me, and all of a sudden I find myself angry, sad, anxious, agitated, overexhilarated, whatever it might be. So we don't enjoy slipping out of control. So the way we do it is we think the way to deal with that is to feel things less deeply. And we can, there's a lot of ways to do that. You can overeat. You can watch a lot of television. You can read novels. I read novels. That's my escape. That's my drug of choice, novels. And or you can actually take drugs. You can drink alcohol. I mean, people just automatically go home and have a glass of wine as soon as they get home. This is how I relax, how I let go of whatever feelings were disturbing me. I just tone everything down just a little bit. Doesn't even occur to them that they shouldn't. I was at a wedding recently, and it was an Ananda wedding, so no alcohol was being served, but the bride's family came from outside of Ananda, and they were talking about the fact there was going to be no alcohol anywhere at the whole thing, and he said to me, "If you don't drink, how do you get along with each other?" I loved it. It was a perfectly good question. I said, "Oh, we actually just like each other. We learned to love each other." But it was a perfect, because the emotions get out of control, so you deaden the feelings. But the long-range effect of deadening your feelings, of course, is that's the way not to have the ones that you don't want to have, but it becomes an across the board. And so you become disconnected. And more importantly, feeling is the fundamental aspect of consciousness. I mean, and the actual fundamental feeling that is the aspect of consciousness is bliss. From joy I came, for joy I live, in sacred joy I melt. That's who we are. And part of our whole struggle being human beings is because we know that. If we did not know that our fundamental nature is bliss, we would be just fine. I mean, I don't go around wishing I was 6'4", and could, reach the high things on the shelf without the stepladder. It doesn't cross my mind because I'm not. I just know I'm not. But when I'm unhappy, I know there's something wrong. And it's because I know there's something wrong with being unhappy is why I push against it. If it were just the way things were and it couldn't be changed, it wouldn't even cross your mind, because it wouldn't be a possibility in consciousness. But we all know that we were made for bliss. And we all know that feeling is who we are. And even when we deaden our feelings, we have a clear sense that I've diminished myself rather than increased it, even if we're pretending it's all fine. See, that's the revolt against divine law. We think it's working, but it doesn't work, because we suddenly find ourselves isolated, alone, unable to connect, dry, unhappy. It just didn't work. It was a good idea, but it didn't work. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Sometimes it seems like a great idea, because things are unbearable. Because that does happen. They're just unbearable, so we have to deaden our feelings. But then we find out that doesn't work, and so we then have to find out, how to keep the greatness of our feelings and our sensitivities, but not go out of control. So we make a distinction, which is somewhat arbitrary, but it's a very clear one in terms of understanding ourselves, between feelings and emotions. Because feelings is your basic consciousness. The masters are extremely tender-hearted. And that's an important thing to understand. I mean, a great saint, especially an avatar, completely free soul, incarnates out of compassion. In the Festival of Light, it says, "Greater can no love be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, willingly to embrace limitation, pain, and death for the salvation of mankind. Such ever has been the sacrifice of the great masters for the world." I mean, there's no karma that made Jesus come back. He didn't have any karma to come back and be crucified. Yogananda didn't have any karma to leave India and struggle in America and be vilified in the press and sued by his own disciples. and betrayed over and over again by people who didn't understand, to be run out of town in Miami because he was a colored man trying to teach white people. I mean, these were not pleasant experiences for him, to carry all this karma for his disciples and have his body suffer so much. None of this. But he did it for one reason. He had tremendous compassion. He looked and he saw people who still did not understand divine law and were therefore miserable, and he could help them. So you don't want to not have those kinds of feelings. He wept when his disciples were unhappy. That poem, When I Am Only a Dream, and he talked about the compassion he would feel, and he said, I will weep through my eyes and perchance through your eyes. Or maybe he said in reverse, I will weep through your eyes and also through my own. But he would weep with us when we weep, because Jesus does know the troubles we've seen. He knows them even more deeply than we know them, because he's not afraid to feel what he really feels. And this world, taken on its own terms, is a very intensely painful, because so many of us are looking for happiness in the wrong places, and we just keep suffering for it. And we commit ourselves to that which is temporary, and then it dissolves on us. And then we just feel utterly bereft. And then none of this, no one can make light of this. It's agonizing. And then beautiful things happen. Your wonderful children are born. People fall in love, make great art, listen to fabulous music, see great heroic actions by people. There's a great deal also that's just thrilling to see. But there it all is. So deadening doesn't work. But, so I was going to say, so then we have to look at the Master's example. When Yogananda's disciple, Sister Gyanamata, died, he said he saw her merge into the infinite. She was completely free, but he wept at her funeral. It's just amazing to contemplate, because she had been his friend and now she was gone. And on just that side of him, he just, they'd had a wonderful, as Gyanamata and Yogananda, it had been a wonderful experience, and now it was over. Amazing to me. So this is the first thing I just really wanted understood. Emotions and feelings are two different things. I'm just going to draw like a person here. Not a very interesting person. I'll give it curly hair. That was how I always used to draw myself, but now I don't have that anymore. Okay. And that we have the chakras running up the center of the spine. And when we meditate, we work with the center of ourselves. And all through even, English language, we're always talking about being centered or off-centered, being pulled out of myself or coming back to myself. Between being knocked over, being straight up. We also talk about being uplifted or downcast. And all of these words are because intuitively we recognize that what's really happening and defining us is this flow of energy in the center of ourselves. This is the astral spine, the astral being, the chakras. These are whole big classes in themselves, but it's just the essence is that we are this center. And when we meditate, especially when we learn to meditate more deeply, doing Kriya or Hong Sau, where you're really concentrating on the breath, if one is blessed with a meditation in which you actually do enter into those realities, you're suddenly conscious of the fact that this is my reality, that everything really emanates from this center experience. And when I can be centered, this is plain English, when I can be centered in myself, then everything looks really different, doesn't it? And when we make mistakes, it's because we get drawn out of ourselves. So when we feel things, we feel them in our deepest self. This is a self beyond personality. This is where bliss comes from. Bliss is the self beyond personality, and we're always centered. Even just if you think of it physically, this where we're centered here. But even in order to participate in the world, we have to come out from there, don't we? We have to reach out, we have to speak, we have to look, we have to listen. Some way or another, from this center point, we're leaning out. Now, that's fine if the energy is flowing from the center. through. But what happens to us is that we allow ourselves, instead of defining ourselves by the center, we move over. Whatever it might be. And so all of a sudden, instead of feeling flowing from the center, we have let the feeling itself, we have centered ourselves in the feeling. And as soon as the feeling no longer emanates from our center, that's when feeling becomes emotion. Okay? Feeling is who we are when we're centered in ourselves. Emotion is when we take those feelings and allow that to become our center. Then it becomes an emotion. Now, when we're standing in the center of ourselves, even if you just think of it from martial arts, which I know nothing about, but you're solid. I always watch Chidambar, who studied Aikido for many years. Whenever he stands, you always watch him plant himself. He never just stands, he always plants himself. And you can see him from all those years of training, just standing in the center of himself, because when he's in the center of himself, he can go any direction he needs to go. If you're over here, you're off balance to begin with. And so whatever input might come, you're not going to be able to respond to it as properly. So that's what happens to us when we allow our feelings to become emotion. If we have very deep feelings, like Swami did, but because he was always balanced in the center of himself, he could respond to whatever required him to respond. If he was already over here, then something happens, then you just don't have a place from which to respond. That's the principle of not letting yourself get too carried away, even with positive things. It's not that you're not trying to feel them very deeply, but you don't want to get carried away. Because once you get carried away, you're suddenly, as soon as something else happens, you're only on one foot or one toe, like that, and then you topple over. And that's exactly how it works. So that's, again, when I was saying you start looking for the objective markers. In a simple way, we used to think about it like this, like when should you give advice to someone? And I remember Swami always saying, if you have a really strong desire to give the advice, probably it's not a good idea. Because as soon as you have a strong desire, you've shifted over from center to being already pre-committed to a certain idea, and then you're not at peace. If your only desire is to be helpful, but just to desire to be helpful is very centered. The desire that I need to tell them this, detached from the desire to be helpful, can be a little dicey. Okay, now let me think about there's another image I can give. Any questions or thoughts about this? If you can say, I feel great temptation to break your head in half with a frying pan, is different than saying, taking the frying pan and breaking your head in half, someone else's head in half. You can still feel it, but you can see it from where you're standing. You're watching that, my little pawn really wants to smash your little pawn to bits. And you can still have it. So it's not a question of pretending you don't feel that way. It's not allowing yourself, let's talk about being angry at someone that you love. When you're emotional, you can become so angry at someone that you love that you forget anything that's ever happened. You become so centered in the emotion in the moment that you just forget that there's any other reality. Now, something bad may have really happened, but if you're standing in your center, you can perceive that something bad has really happened, but all the rest of your reality, you're still standing in it. And the feeling may be so intense that something has to be done, but you're still standing in it. My feelings are terribly hurt by the action that you took. Instead of, you're such an awful person, you've always been an awful person, which is what people will say. Or somebody is careless, and you'll forget every other caring thing that they ever did, and all your reality is the careless thing they did for you. Right then. Or, life is going pretty well, but now I've faced one little disappointment, and now everything that's gone well is gone. And I'm living my whole reality I've become centered in one feeling, and so now it's shifted over into being an emotion. And you're by definition, you simply can't see the whole picture anymore. It's another way of like, here it is, and it's black. There's no question, it's black. And maybe something really black has entered my world. But if I'm looking at it from the center, it's only this big. But if I move until it's here or here, I mean, how does it rank in proportion to the world that I see right now? You see? Now, it's still exactly the same. And this is where you don't comfort yourself by telling yourself an untruth. You don't say, oh, it's not really black. It's actually a beautiful shade of pink. Everything that happens is perfect. No, it's black. And it might even be way bigger. It might be as big as this. It could be just catastrophic. But it's still, from the center, it's only part of the reality that you're living in. If I move in and live only in it, then it is the only reality I have. Feeling is still the same, but now it's become emotion because it has distorted my perception. And that's the word that we want to use. You see, it's distorted my perception of reality. And that's what we want to avoid. This is how people who love each other for a long time can suddenly hate each other. Yeah, because something black happens. But then your reality gets completely distorted. Yes.
I was wondering.
Because also, because the way they love each other was the same. I love you, you love me, you're going to take care of me forever, you're always going to do this, you're always going to do that. Now you haven't done that anymore, so now it's just like, that's why even deep feelings, deep positive emotions need to be seen in the context. Because then, when things shift, as things invariably shift, your darling little child grows up to be a rather pilly adult. And there it is. What can you do? But if you've kept it in proportion, and this is the word, we don't remember divine law. A friend of mine not too recently, came down with a serious cancer. Do I take treatment? Do I not take treatment? The husband, the wife, what's everybody going to do? I said, you know what? I don't really think it makes a lot of difference. I think the soul is in charge. Make whatever decisions you want to make. Things are just going to unfold the way they're going to unfold. Destiny is not so random that it just depends on my tiny little world. Distorted perception of reality. I've got to do something, I've got to do something, I've got to do something. I did something, I didn't do something. And we're not standing in the center, which is my. There's a lot of karma that's being played out here. It's not that we should be stupid, but, we have to think also that there's a greater power going on here. I don't have enough experience to do it. Why am I reacting? Either it's true or it's not true. The question is, what's the truth? My perception. Well, then she might be wrong. Then you can go around and do an impartial survey and find out if everybody else shares the same opinion. But it could be true. Either they're right or they're wrong. But if we stay centered, we can find out what reality might be. But people are always reacting to being told the truth. I used to tell everybody the truth until I finally figured out, nobody wants to hear it, Asha. You're out of your mind. I remember when, it was many years ago, but this is when I thought people learn things by being told. So this person was just behaving awful. So I thought, it was well-meaning, it was just misguided. I'll just tell them that they're being awful. So I did. And then that person immediately went to Swami Kriyananda and said that I definitely should be removed from the ministry because I was such a menace to the well-being of everyone. And then proceeded to give Swami their perception of what had happened, which was an absolute fabrication. I have a very clear memory. I have many faults, but not remembering what I said is not one of them. I do remember what I said. So Swami's telling me this, and Swami knew the whole situation. He knew my fault, and he knew the other person's fault too. And so he's telling me about this. And I said, what did they say I said? Swami told it, and I said, of course, I never would have said anything like that. It was preposterous. And Swami said, of course, I know that. And I said, I resign. You don't have to fire me, I resign. It's like, I've had it with this whole thing. And he refused to allow me to resign. But then he said, people don't want to be told, Asha. You have to think about, not just about what you could say, but what you should say. That's where emotion gets involved. I have this perception of reality and I'm going to impose it on people because after all, I'm smart, I see it. My friend said to me, Asha, you tell me my problems more clearly than I want to know them. Unfortunately, she was my friend, not the other guy. And but it was true. But where does that come from? So on the other side, when you find yourself feeling hurt and sad because somebody said something blunt to you, it's not a question of whether they should have said it, whether they were nice. It's only one question. Is it true? And the mere fact that you react is almost always a sign that there's some truth in it. As Swami once said to me, if somebody says your feet are green, they either are or they aren't. And you tend not to have a big emotional response. No, they're not. No, they're not. When you have a big, that can't be true, that in itself is a clue that somehow, why am I defending this? Why have I moved from my center into the emotion of having to be recognized for such and so quality? Either it's true or it's not true. If I really want to develop this quality, maybe I should work on it instead of just waiting for people to hand it to me on a silver tray.
Yeah, and it could start out with a feeling of sad, but then I know that I need to move to something.
See, this is where Swami would say to me, I would spend all my energy feeling guilty and sad. And I wouldn't, it's like, okay, I'm feeling guilty and sad because I'm inept in this particular thing. Here's a suggestion. Why don't you learn to be good at it? Why don't you study it? Why don't you get people to help you? Why don't you, start exercising? Why don't you do something? But instead, I would spend all my energy feeling guilty and sad. And then when that had exhausted me so completely, then I would just go back to exactly where I was standing. There was no self-development in it. It was just suffer, recover, suffer, recover, suffer, recover, but never go. And I thought, I was being so conscientious because look how much I was suffering. And Swami was very ho-hum about my suffering. I was once, I love this. I forgot this whole incident for many years because it was just so amazing. I believe the issue was writing, because writing was a huge traumatic experience for me. I'm almost done with the karma, but not quite. And I had this project I was supposed to work on. I may be mixing up a few stories, but the end of it was I was very, very upset about something. And Swamiji was he just wasn't responding. He just wasn't being very nice to me. And I was somehow I think I must have been crying like this. And I was conscious of the fact that he had actually gotten up from his chair and he was over at the bureau over here. And in those days, we didn't have electricity and flashlights were a really big thing. And we didn't have much money. So flashlight batteries, which were quite expensive, were a really big deal. So sometimes your batteries would go down and you would replace them, but there'd be a little life left in them and you didn't want to throw them away. So they would accumulate in his house. They'd accumulated in this drawer. And then we had a little tester of some sort. And every so often, when you had nothing better to do, you would test the batteries and see which one were still usable. So I'm there, my life is in pieces, and I'm collapsed in front of him, and I realize he is testing the batteries to see which ones are still useful. I mean, it was like, I was speechless, which is a big thing to make me speechless. I was just speechless. Like, that was the most trivial task in the world. Why wasn't he paying attention to me? But I got the point. And what it actually did, it actually worked. He took a big risk, but it worked. It made me so mad. I just I don't actually remember being angry, but it stirred me. It stirred me because I trusted him and I didn't blame him for what he was doing. I was just so thrown off course. But it stirred me and I believe what happened. I believe it was a writing project and I just went home and I just wrote the article, which I could do, but I always had so much trouble doing. And if this is all the same story, a few days later at a community satsang, Swami said, Asha had a really big test to face, and if she hadn't passed it, she would have left the path. He said, and there was nothing I could do to help her. She had to do it herself. Wowie gazowie. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, I didn't think it would help if you knew. but I got through it. But, okay, why is he treating me this way? Why isn't he holding my hand? Why isn't he comforting me? And I didn't know, but I knew that something was happening that had to happen. I didn't rebel against it and I didn't attack him, which is what I could have done, which is, I think, partly what was going on there. I never thought about that. Maybe that was what the test was. How much did I trust Swami? I only thought of it in terms of gathering up strengthening my spine and doing the work, but maybe it was also just, am I really just going to go with him no matter what he does? That could have been it too, I don't know.
Yeah, it feels.
Yeah, I never thought of that in all these years. It's the first time that's occurred to me, because it's so far out of my way of thinking but it was a moment, what are you doing? But then it shifted into, what are you doing? Why are you suddenly so indifferent to me? Because I was just making this hoo-ha over nothing. Straighten your spine, woman, and do the job,
It's like being forced to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're always being forced to make a choice, and nobody cares. And I don't mean to say that in a bad way, because there comes a point where you realize this is really between me and God, and I will suffer as long as I want to, and nobody can help me. People can love you. Please don't misunderstand me. You can have deep, wonderful, I have so many divinely given, wonderful friendships. And I've had them for, decades of my life. I feel extraordinarily gifted. I don't think I would even be alive, what to speak of still on the path, if it weren't for my friends, who give everything to me, and I'm so grateful for it. But in the final analysis, straighten your spine, woman, and just do it. And nobody cares, because they can't. Nobody can straighten your spine for you. And that's part of what divine law is. You just have to sink into that and realize, And I found a lot of comfort from singing, nobody knows the troubles I've seen. I love the line, nobody knows but Jesus. And it really helps me, because Jesus does know. Then I'm not really alone, but I have to go there. I'll be very fair. It breaks your heart into thousands of pieces. I'm being light about it now, but I didn't come to nobody knows but Jesus with dry eyes, believe me. Yeah, they were very, very tear-filled eyes. But when I finally got to there, I realized how much power there is in that. Because the other side of it is, wow, there's a lot of power in that. It's just really between me and God, everything. Well, because Jesus does know and Jesus does care, whether it's Jesus or whoever you're thinking of. Because that is where the power is. And when you're standing in that power, then all of a sudden everything is different. As long as you're here, where you think that somebody's going to apologize to you, make it work for you, change in such a way that it'll be better. Forgiveness is accepting an apology that's never going to be offered. Master defined ego as the soul, which is the infinite self, identified. He says with the body, let's say with limit, the soul is identified with limitation. And another way of saying that is the body. Soul is identified with the body. Ego exists in both the physical and the astral level. On the causal level, Swami says the ego doesn't play a part. There's a Sanskrit word which many of you have seen me use before because I like it. It's the word jiva, and jiva is in the great ocean of spirit. The great ocean of spirit is comprised of many little bubbles. And each of these, that's you. The jiva is your individual bubble of spirit. It's your individuality from the beginning of creation to divine realization. There is a jiva that is Paramhansa Yogananda. And as many incarnations as he had, that is the individual spark that goes through. The jiva that became Yogananda, became William the Conqueror, became Ferdinand the Third or Arjuna with Krishna, there's still a unique individuality, a unique bubble of creation. And even when the bubble merges back in the sea, the bubble still is the bubble, and it can pull itself out again. So it's a better word than soul, because soul is a little imprecise. The ego is the jiva identified with the body. And if you think about it, all of our grief and suffering comes because we have identified with this limited reality, isn't it? And so when something happens to this one is rejected in one way or another. This one doesn't get what it wants. This one gets really sick. This one gets smashed up in a car. This one is treated rudely. This one isn't allowed to express itself. It's all because the individual jiva is identified with what happens through this body. When your mother thinks that people from Mexico or these people are not as good as her, she's identified with the body she is. She's not Mexican, or she's not a colored person, a dark-skinned person. So I am this and you are that, and everything follows from that. So that's what ego is. Ego is the infinite becoming limited because it's become identified with some limited form. Now, the word identified is a fabulous word here, because the jiva animates this body, expresses through it, but it's not limited by it. The jiva is no less infinite than it's ever been, but it has lost identification with the infinite and become identified with the body. And so even when the physical body dies, the astral body is the chakras, and the chakras are the result of ego, because the jiva identified with what happened to the body. The chakras are the more subtle expression of that identification. What I did, and it's mine. And so even though the physical body dies, the vibrations of consciousness that you express, that's what's in the chakras. So from infinity to limitation, from identifying with spirit to identifying with matter as the sole reality, everything that we do hits one of those vibrations. Every thought, every feeling, every response, it's all based on who do I think I am? What do I think is real? Where do I think my happiness comes from? When someone says you don't have enough experience to do that, you have a certain reaction, and that reaction is based on who you think you are, where you think your happiness comes from, what do you think is real, and it registers as a certain vibration of consciousness, and it makes an impression. Energy is deposited in the chakra that's appropriate for that. So even when your physical body dies, the sum total of the vibrations you've created move into the astral world, and you're still identified. The ego still exists. The jiva is still identified now with the astral body, the astral or the physical. We take the astral body, we put it in the physical body, and now we identify with the physical body. We're still identified with the astral in the sense that we're still moving from our vibrations of consciousness, but now we're expressing them through our senses and our physical body. Okay? So the extent to which we have identified with limitation is the strength of our ego. And so ego is not a question of how powerful a person is, how talented, how much they accomplish. It's a question of how much they identify with limited conditions. Swami Kriyananda did so much in the world, but he would always say, and he really meant it, I've never done anything, he says. Much was done through him, but he never identified with it. So all the books, the music, nothing, it never defined him. It happened, and he was conscious of having been there when it happened, and he knew he had to put out a lot of energy and will, but he never identified with it. So he didn't have to act humble, and he didn't have to pretend his books weren't good, because they weren't him, it didn't matter. He just opened himself and was able to act through it. Does that make sense? So emotion is completely tied to ego, because if you didn't have an egoic identification with limitation, you would never move out of your center. Okay? Most of the time, I do not find it helpful for people to say, oh, it's just my ego. I rarely find a person saying that in such a way that it actually works for them. People say it a lot, but generally speaking, it doesn't conjure up any clear idea of what to do about it. It just is a statement of fact. But what do I do about that? How do I get rid of my ego? And our ego is not really an enemy because we have to have one. We have to identify with this body. It's a question of how completely and how exclusively we identify with it. But we have to identify with it some. Yogananda, at the end of his life, Swami talked about how he said when they were walking together, sometimes Master would stumble. And he said, I don't know which body I'm supposed to keep going. He said, I have to ask people whether I've eaten or not. He was so unidentified with his body, he couldn't even keep track of it. I mean, that's nice. But most of us have responsibility. Swami described Kriyananda, as he put it, as an event for which I am responsible. That's what he said. I don't consider it myself. It's just an event I'm responsible for. And so he had to take care of the event of Kriyananda very conscientiously, which he did. But he never allowed himself to be defined by it, which is why he always stayed so centered. Because when you're centered and this event's going on around you, what is the point? It's not me. The energy in the chakras are vrittis. Vritti means whirlpool. Chakra itself means wheel. A vritti is a vibration of energy stored in the chakras. I was talking about, my long-standing karmic difficulties with various people and wanting so-and-so to apologize to me when God knows when, and I've had a few intuitions about this, but some hundreds or thousands of years ago when so-and-so did something I thought they shouldn't have done, it made a vritti in my heart, and that vritti says, you owe me an apology. Right. And, for many incarnations. So every time I would see these people, who knows how many lifetimes, my first thought would be, you owe me an apology. I mean, even if I didn't know why or what, it just would always be there because it was a vritti. It was a very strong vritti because we're very close and we're friends. It's always the people you love the most who make the deepest. So I had a vritti, and the vritti was, you owe me an apology. And so everything would go along fine in this incarnation, and then I would be demanding an apology for something that hadn't even happened. That happened hundreds of years ago, but I had a vritti that says you, in this case personal, specifically to these people. It can be cosmic. It's like, the universe owes me an apology. So I have a vritti in my chakra that says you owe me an apology. And when certain things happen of a certain quality, they just activate the vritti. Somebody should apologize to me. And if you happen to be the one standing in front of me, then I want you to apologize to me. There's a great problem in life, which is we do not know what we are really upset about. And we do not know where our pain is really coming from. This happens a lot when people are not self-aware. You do something, I hurt, it causes me pain, therefore you have hurt me. But in fact, you may already have been really hurt. And you've got a deep vritti of hurt inside you. And unfortunately, that person does something which activates the vritti. They may or may not have done anything actually at all. But the confusing thing is, you are experiencing pain. But the cause and effect is a little confused. This is sort of when you were talking about easily coming to tears, when the reaction to a situation is way out of proportion to what you can see in front of you, but the experience is real because what you've activated is a vritti. And the vritti, it's an unresolved vritti. You just got a lot of pain in there, and then somebody does something that is close enough to it that it starts coming out. But vrittis are just patterns of energy. They aren't granite rocks, they aren't Mount Rushmore, they aren't Himalayas, they're just patterns of energy. It's a certain magnetism and it's a certain momentum in a certain direction. So if you think of it as momentum in a certain direction, you change it by creating a contrary momentum. And when you think of vrittis, this way you also, an image that always works is a river. I used to swim in the Yuba River sometimes up by Nevada City. It's a big river that runs through a canyon, lots of rocks. And there would be all these different rocks, here and there and everywhere. And the rocks would cause the water to get caught. It would get caught over here in these rocks. It would, so the river would be heading for the sea, as the river is always doing, but it would get caught in the rocks. And so all of this water, or lots of water, would just kind of hang out in these rocks, or this water would have to circulate around and hang around for a long time in these rocks before it could ever finally make its way back. Now, one of the ways to dissolve a vritti is to dissolve the rocks, which is to say, to accept the apology that's never going to be given. But you dissolve the rocks, or you realize this is pointless. I just don't want to be mad at these people anymore, whatever it might be. Or nobody cares. And then there's nothing to catch the water anymore. So what happens then is all the water that was spinning out now suddenly is just flowing, and the flow to the sea has increased. Okay, that's how vritti is dissolved. One of the ways it's dissolved is because it hits the surface and things happen, and you get to have an experience. Okay, I have a vritti, for example, that I'm an intellectual person, and intellectual persons are superior to other persons. This is partly my Jewish upbringing. Okay, and so I get to just do that, and then I find out that this is not really bringing me a lot of happiness. It's not working for me. It's not working for people I know. It's just not. This vritti is like a really bad idea, and so this rock that has always been, I'm superior because of my intelligence, I suddenly think this is a really bad idea. It's a really bad idea. And I realize it's a bad idea because I've been smashing up against it, for a really long time. So I'm finally willing to say, I think I'll just let this vritti go. And that's one of the ways we do it. We have experiences, usually very painful ones. And at the end of them, we recognize that I don't really want to hold this anymore. And that's one of the ways we dissolve vrittis. The other way we dissolve vrittis is the water's flowing this way, and the pull of this whirlpool is like this. And another way to dissolve a vritti is just to make this stronger and stronger, because this is just an energy relationship of magnetism. When the Yuba River floods in the winter, all the whirlpools are drawn into it because they can't stand against the power of the flow toward the sea. So in ourselves, this energy, the river, is our determination to live by what's true, our strengthening our spines and getting on with the real job of it, our putting our attention at the spiritual eye and letting our energy run really strongly toward God, our serving others selflessly, anything that just increases the positive flow of energy will have a magnetic relationship with everything that wants to distract us from that positive flow. And if the positive flow gets strong enough, the vritti will just dissolve. You won't ever have to live through it. It just dissolves because you just put out enough of the right kind of energy that this wrong kind of energy just can't stand against anymore, which is what I was saying. You notice that something has happened and you've just responded differently. And what's happened is, because of whatever other work you've been doing, that vritti, which always ate a piece of your energy when triggered, it just isn't there anymore. You don't even know where it went or when it went. And Kriya, yoga practice per se, all of the techniques that we teach, culminating with Kriya practice itself, increases the energy, the positive energy flowing up the spine, and it just starts dissolving vrittis. That's why Master said he works out karma. A vritti has at the center of it a seed of karma, some little thing that you have to learn with all this energy whirling around it. And if you can dissolve that seed of karma, then there's nothing to hold the energy there anymore, and it too gets dissolved. So that's what Kriya practice is. That's why Master called it the airplane route to God. One Kriya, he said, is like 1 year of right living. And right living presumes that you don't do anything to create new ones. So, and if some people are better meditators than others, so Kriya is the whole path: devotion to Guru, trust, willingness to try, all of the whole thing. It doesn't go down to just something this small. But the Kriya practice itself is very powerful in that respect too. Okay, does that make sense? So you work at it from all angles. I do. You attack it from every side. You meditate, you offer yourself to God, you uplift, you fight the battle on a day-to-day basis, you pay attention, to become conscious enough of what it feels like to be centered so that you can tell when you're not. And then, so first of all, you have to have enough experience of knowing what it feels like to be centered so that you can tell when you're not. If you've never been centered, you have no way of knowing. That's what I was saying about subconscious training. You don't even know what it feels like to be centered. This is where coming to satsangs, coming to Sunday service, reading spiritual books, listening to Swami's music, meditating, chanting, all of these things give you an experience of what it feels like to be centered. So then when you're not centered, you have some point of comparison. So when you're not centered, then you have to train yourself to be able to notice, and then you have to train yourself to do something other than say, I'm not centered and I don't care. Then you have to have a strategy for dealing with it. And it's not just a question of deadening your feelings or suppressing your emotions. You have to have a strategy for it that actually is going to be consistent with who you are, consistent with what will really help you. And suppression won't help you. Dismissing it as stupid won't help you. Feeling it as guilty won't help you. Becoming in despair because I'm still working with this won't help you. None of those are good strategies. Yeah, what I would start with is once you realize you're not centered, do what you can to minimize the damage. Because you have the problem of having become uncentered, and then you have all the collateral damage that will happen all around you if you allow that to run too far. So it might be that you leave the house, you stop the car and go for a walk. It may be that you shut yourself in your room until you're able. It's better than thinking that this is the moment when I really need to tell everyone what I really think of them and have always thought about them. That's not a good strategy as a rule. It may be that something needs to be said. It's not that you can't speak or shouldn't speak. Oftentimes you really do need to. But you just want to have a strategy that causes you to be able to tell the difference. Even to be able to say, I know I'm not very centered, but I know if I wait, I'm not going to say this and it needs to be said. Even that's enough, because that's a slight difference than now I know the truth and I'm going to give it to you. Is that fair? And working with it, it's a lifelong story. It's just, it's this morning for me, wow, look at me. I'm still, allowing myself to feel anxious about this or concerned about that. Let me try to come back into center. And I think that one has to work with it until all the vrittis are dissolved. Because until they're all dissolved, which is a fairly high state of realization, they're just going to keep persuading you to go out of the center and off into their little whirlpool. I mean, I was thinking just yesterday, I'm a high-strung person. This is why caffeine is not my best friend. I thought, just why am I still so high-strung? What is the point? But I wasn't able to dismantle it, but I just was saying, isn't this interesting that even still, like sitting here right now after all these years, why do I feel tense about anything after all that I've been through? But I do. So I have to work with that. I have to do my kriyas a little more deeply. I have to be conscious of it. I have to do japa. I have to think about things. Yeah, constantly. And then sometimes working is really big, like you're just way out of control. And it's like you have to call in all the emergency forces and all the big guys, to help you. And sometimes it's just a little course correction. In fact, being centered is the most dynamic you can possibly. Swami was the least passive person I've ever known. He was absolutely engaged every moment. He was always completely aware. When I was teaching a series of classes once, I started teaching 4-part series of classes, and I would teach in Sacramento, San Francisco, and Palo Alto. That's when I lived in Ananda Village. I would teach Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in 3 cities. And after I did the first, and I always teach like I do now, just, like here we go. And after I did the first series, I said to Swami, my gosh, how am I going to know when I go back for the second class in Sacramento and the second class in Palo Alto, what the heck happened? Because I'm not following a program. And he said, by being completely conscious when you're talking. Oh, well, that's no problem, so I'll just be completely conscious when I'm talking. But that was the answer. then you pay attention. You're wide awake all the time, and then you know what to do. So being centered is not at all being passive. When you're centered is when you're absolutely wide awake. You're watching, you're paying attention, you're seeing what's needed, you're praying to God, and you're like the Aikido master. You're absolutely balanced, and you're ready to go in any direction at any time. So no, being centered is the most dynamic, the most capable that you can possibly. Master was completely centered in himself, and he was so dynamic. He ran out onto the stage, how feels everyone, and led them in the chant. He healed people, he did miraculous things, but he did it all from the center. So if you think to just let things go and, that's not being centered, that's just being asleep. So very important to get the distinction. I'm glad you brought it up. Being centered is where all the energy is. You're right in the middle of that flowing river. To be passive is to fall into an emotion. Because when you're right in the middle of that flowing river, you have all the command, you have all the energy of the universe at your command. And the emotion is, I wish I could be rescued. I mean, everybody waits to be rescued. It's a terrible quality, but we all do. I remember when Swami made it clear that I was never going to leave Palo Alto. This is probably my last assignment in my life. He made this clear a long time ago. I thought I would found several communities, and in fact, no. I moved from Ananda Village to here. 30 years later, here I sit. But I thought for quite a long time that sooner or later, we'd go somewhere else. And when he finally made it clear that I wasn't going anywhere else, it was very interesting how much of me had been waiting to be rescued. And I didn't even know it. Not rescued in an everything way, but there were many, many, many things I was trying to outlast rather than deal with. I just thought sooner or later I'll get rescued from this. I don't really have to face it. And with all due respect, I don't have children, but I know a lot of people with children try to just outlast their children. Just figure, they won't be toddlers forever. I understand from parents that tell me sometimes that what isn't solved when it's a toddler comes back when it's an early teen. And but somehow there's some psychological relationship there. But a woman who had basically just tried to outlast her child's young years and just kind of just tried to endure rather than engage. Child came back in early teenage and she was right back there. And she said to me so sweetly, I thought I was going to get away with it. But this time she engaged. Because just sitting there waiting for time to pass to be rescued was not being centered. It was in wishful thinking. Yeah. I mean, I don't have children, but I don't have children partly because I actually know what it is. I've had a lot of children in a lot of lifetimes, and it's unrelenting. There's no escape. It's not about you, and nobody cares. Your children don't care either. Nobody cares. I mean, and in that sense, the Indian culture, in its ideal form, in its understanding of the role of women, is really exquisite. Because you're right, you're just there to serve everybody, and nobody's there to serve you. And that's the story. And yeah, it could be really annoying. Peace and calmness are different. Peace is, there's nothing happening. Calmness is, I'm in the middle of the battlefield and there's bullets flying in all directions and I have to rescue my injured comrade and at the same time kill the enemy, but I can remain calm. So that's a very important distinction. To be peaceful when you're raising children is highly unlikely. To be calm while you're raising children is entirely different. So I have a friend who said he was on the path for a long time, then became a father, 2 children within 2 years. He said, I always thought I was a pretty selfless guy. He said, until I became a father. He said, then I realized that to be selfless means that you cease to exist. And it was just like, nobody cares about me anymore. Nobody. All I am is for these children. But he just said, okay. And both his children said to me, in all their growing up years, they never saw their father rattled. He never became angry. He never got off center because he just gave up. He just was there for them, and whatever it was, he just did it. I mean, very unusual. It's a high level of success. Children are forgiving. They know you love them even if you blow your top. Don't try to shine God on. He sees right through it.
Yeah.
Don't try to say, oh, hell, I surrender this to you, I surrender this to you, when it's perfectly clear to everyone involved that you're nowhere near ready to surrender it. Or you actually, to speak of the word attachment, Jeff, which we haven't touched since that, if you're attached, you're attached. Sometimes mothers will write to me, oh, I really need to become more detached from my children. I said, don't even think about it. It's just not the right word. How could you be detached from your children? Why would you even want to be detached from your children? Even to say it, it's just everything in you is going to rebel against it. So what you have to say is, Lord, I'm completely attached to my children. You just have to help me to behave properly. Give me the courage to behave properly. Guide me, tell me what to do, given who I am and how I feel. Help me. So if you need to release something that you don't want to release, you just have to say to God, I'm so uninterested in releasing this. You're just going to have to you're going to have to help me through it. Because, that one's not going to come from me, I promise you. It's just a very honest conversation. I'm terribly afraid of this. If you want this to happen, you're going to have to do something here. Give me the courage. Give me the will. But pray honestly. It just doesn't serve to. Jesus does know the troubles you've seen, and therefore, speak of them as you really are experiencing them, and don't try to be better. Because, see, think about it like this, because I've done a lot of counseling through the years. Sometimes people will come to me and they'll present a situation to me, and either afterwards I'll find out from someone else that I only got half the story, or either from intuition or because we're a very close community, I know the whole story. But if the person only presents to me what they think I want to hear, or they have the nerve to tell me, I can't deal with the rest of it. And so we'll just sort of deal with, yes, it's true that your arm has been shattered, but yes, there's a problem with your shoelaces, isn't there? Let's see what we can do about your shoelaces. And meanwhile, we have this shattered arm, but we're not going to talk about the shattered arm, we're just going to talk about the shoelaces, and it's just hopeless. But God is really the same. If you only will talk about your shoelaces, He really can't help you. He won't intrude. He won't force change on you until there's some part of you that is wanting it. And so even just to say, I'm so protective of this shattered arm, Lord, please don't ask me about becoming detached from my children. But Lord, I'll go where you take me. Please don't take me there. But if you take me there, then you also have to give me something I don't have. Because your own mind is so confused, you have to clarify it. Your own sense of yourself is so confused that you have to clarify it. It's you who are confused. But the divine Leela, the divine law, is that you yourself have to come to these understandings piece by piece. You have to bring yourself with your own willpower and your courage to those understandings. That's how it will unfold. And if you're not willing to do that, then you get to suffer. I mean, you're actually asking the question about free will, but it's too complicated a question. I put it like this. I know that my actions affect the quality of my life. I can't answer philosophically how much free will I have, how much is destiny. I haven't the foggiest idea. If I don't get out of bed in the morning, if I just lie there and eat chocolates and watch YouTube all day, I don't really feel great at the end of the day. And, if I'm just passive in the face of my challenges and put out no energy to behave properly, nothing good comes of that. So whether it was predestined that I would or not predestined or this or that, what difference does it make? I need to be practical and self-evident to me that my actions affect my fate. So I think I'll try to act properly, because if I'm not enjoying my fate, I would rather change it. That's the only answer I've ever been able to come up with for that, because I don't know. Master said almost everything is karma. What little bit is free will, only the wise can discern. But if it's karma, still, if I eat bonbons all day and don't get out of bed, I feel terrible. So I don't care whether it was karma or free will or God's will. I feel awful. I'm just going to go, I take it all the way back down to the little tiny bit that matters to me. The theory is like, who cares about the theory? I feel awful or I feel better. I feel awful or I feel better. I've thought about it An astrologer spoke of, a certain, like a time of just where lots has to come out. And so whenever things would happen, I would just think, well, and what the astrologer advised was, don't even try to put reason on it. He said, it's just energy that has to be released. And if you don't identify with it, just it'll pass through you. If you identify with it and resist it, but it may have to pass through until it's cleared up. And also you get over your fear of it, because a lot of it is fear. Just fear of fear. I realize that suffering is very unpleasant. But when you're suffering it, as Swami said, they say that hell is eternal because when you're in it, that's how you feel about it. But once you're not suffering, you're not suffering. It's the strangest thing about emotions and emotional upset. When you're in it, it's so intense, but when you're not in it, you're just not in it. So what causes it to linger, this is what I found, is two things. One is resentment that it happened at all. Resentment against God, resentment against whatever, but just resentment that you had to suffer. And the second is fear of that suffering returning. And those are the two things that make it go on and on and on and on. Otherwise, it's just hell while you're in it and then you're out of it. But if after, even when you're out of it, you're angry or resentful because it happened, or you're afraid of it returning. Both of those just magnify the experience. Now, those are not easy things to overcome, but it's important to realize that they're separate. They're all entirely separate. I'll put it like this. It's bad enough that you suffer. Let's not make a complex out of it. Because I've seen people who had a bad experience, and a decade, 15 years later, their life is being run to avoid it happening again. And so it's not only that it happened then, but it's been the definition ever since. And that's a whole separate set of emotions that's completely different from the original one. Not easy, I promise you, but still worth considering. I certainly have learned a lot from suffering, things I could never have ever learned. I just have compassion. I never did before because I know what it felt like. So I have really not enjoyed the experience, but I'm really happy with the results. So why would I be afraid of having to learn more? You just like, why would I be afraid of being asked to become an even better person?
Because it feels so bad at the time.
Yeah, because hell feels eternal when you're in it. And so it's natural to say, oh, I'm a little nervous. Human love, perfectly expressed, is almost the same as divine love. There's nothing wrong with loving other people. You should love other people with your whole heart. But you should trust God to bring you what you need at the time you need it. So that's why I say to mothers, don't even think about being detached from your children. When it's time for you to be detached from your children, God will help you. If you need to become detached from them, love everybody with everything you have. Master Swami loved more than anybody I've ever known. Swami loved us without any reservation. But he loved us for the sake of our divinity, not because I love you now, you love me. Well, it's without expectations. Nobody can live without expectations. You just love completely and leave the rest in God's hands. But to hold back is not. Of course, we have to love everybody in physical bodies. That's who we are. We can't just run around loving abstract, disincarnate beings. Who else do we know? It's too theoretical. You have to just live where you are. You're a mother, you're a wife. You have to love the people around you. Just love them, don't worry about it. No harm will come to you from loving. Much harm will come to you from holding back, but nothing will come to you from loving. And yes, then, therefore, but love from as centered a place as you can. I don't own these children, I don't own this husband, I don't own this home. I'm just here to serve. I'm God's instrument. But I need to be a good one. And then nobody cares. I mean, I know that sounds really strange, but I'm You know exactly what I mean. I knew you do. Yeah, nobody cares, and just you knock yourself out trying to get them to care, and they don't. Nobody knows but Jesus. That's probably the last word. All right?